Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited for today's call. We've been going through the different steps over the last few weeks of what it means to be a core consultant. And there are 6 essential steps. And this one that we want to talk about today, I think is really important. We've emphasized a lot recently the need for us to talk to more people, to get out of our comfort zone, to introduce ourselves, to get mingling with others, and of course, building relationships and friendships, and of course, extending those invitations for people to learn more about NECAN. But there's a follow-on activity there that I think is really important, and that is, of course, showing people the business opportunity. What I have found, and I'm not sure what you might think of this yourself, if you've seen this either in your own business activities or if you've seen it in your group, but many of us are very confident talking about the products with others, very quick to share testimonials, very quick to see the benefits of what we offer in our product range to a certain need that people might be experiencing in their physical life. But what we don't often do is act with that same level of confidence when it comes to showing people the business opportunity. I wonder how many of us here, if we were to take a poll, do a kind of a little survey, would say they feel very confident in talking about the business opportunity with others. I think for the vast majority, not on NECAN, and network marketing in general, there is some extra nervousness that comes around this. I want to address this today and share with you 10 tips that I have used in my life for improving my confidence when it comes to presenting the business opportunity. I want to start by sharing a story as well, just to give some context to this. When I was 18 years old, oh, hang on, I've got Jeannie here is saying something. I don't see anything. Jeannie, can you see our screen? Can everyone see me? Can I have a thumbs up? Yeah, people are seeing me. Okay, Jeannie, it might be on your end if you're not seeing anything. But when I was 18 years old, I was asked to give a 5-minute talk to an audience of about 150 people. It took me all week to practice and to prepare that talk, and I was really, really nervous leading up to my delivery of it. On the day when I had to present it, even though I prepared and practiced for 5 minutes, I think it lasted about 2.5, maybe 3. But this was what I found was really interesting. I was sat there waiting to give my talk, my presentation, feeling so nervous and so anxious. But I noticed to the right of me, the person that was overseeing the meeting sat next to one of his colleagues, and he leaned over to him and he said, one of our speakers today has called in sick. He can't speak. Can you cover his spot? It's 10 minutes. And this man sat there ever so nonchalant and just kind of gave a nod. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Not a problem. Right? And he kind of sat back in his chair, his legs crossed. He pulls out a little piece of paper and a pen. And he's just kind of thinking to himself, make a little note, right? Make a little note. And as someone else was talking, he'd sit there and go, that's good. Make a little note. And he just kind of sat back, and then he just kind of listened to the presentations and looked ever so comfortable. I was watching this, of course, because I had my 5-minute slot, half his time, with a week's preparation, nowhere near as comfortable as he was. And he got up and I don't even know what he said. I can't recall now. Of course, it was many years ago. But he blew me away. I just remember thinking, that was awesome. I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to just get up and speak with confidence and grab an audience, grab the crowd, and move them like he did. Now, I have to say, I've had lots of opportunities to speak since then, but that experience stuck with me. And it became a desire of mine to not be so nervous, not be so anxious, and to be comfortable speaking to others. So I want to share with you some tips that have helped me since then. That's been over 20 years now since that experience. But I'm mindful that there are many people in our room today on this call, many people in our businesses that will relate to that version of myself that I shared just a moment ago, and have that nervousness, have that anxiety, see others doing it and go, I would love to be like that. What can I do? So I've got a presentation that I've put together with just some notes that I hope will be helpful for you in developing these skills. Because like I said, if we don't show the business opportunity to others, then how many people are going to join our business as business partners? How is the duplication going to happen where the income really starts to grow? It won't. And we might be great at everything else, but if we don't do this activity, then nothing follows. We stagnate. Our business becomes static. And in fact, it doesn't stay static. It starts to corrode, doesn't it? If we're not showing the business to others, if we're not inviting them to join us, if we're not getting involved at that level of the business, everything starts to deteriorate thereafter. So this is really, really important for us to master here. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, just really quickly, just to make sure, can you see the image on the screen there of the woman with the big arms going like that? Yes, you can. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about how to gain confidence and get better at showing the business opportunity with others. I'm going to share some tips, and again, these tips, have you seen my slide change? Yeah, excellent. Okay, these tips I think just resonate with a lot of us. So the first one is expect to be nervous. I think this is really important. For many of us, we think, I've been in the business for 10 years now, I shouldn't feel nervous anymore. The reality is, if you care, you will always feel nervous. And I love what it says here, you're never going to be 100% ready, and it's never going to be just the right time. But that's the point. What that means is every moment is the right moment. And if you want it, then you just have to do it. I love that because it's not about finding the perfect moment. It's about finding the moment. Whether it's perfect or not is often irrelevant. We need to just be willing to get out there. And this is what I've said. Tell yourself it's okay. I got taught a really great tip recently, this past week, about the self-talk that we have. And the counsel was given to use second-person language in our heads. If we're having an inner dialogue or inner monologue with ourselves, we might say, oh, I'm so useless at this. I can't do this. I can't. And we'll give ourselves a lot of negative self-talk. But if we put it in a different perspective and say, you can do this, talk to yourself like another person. If you were to use that negative self-talk, but put it in third person, what would happen? If you were saying to yourself, you're no good, you're useless, you can't do this. That starts to change the language, doesn't it? But if you say, I can do this, or you can do it, this is going to be okay, it's all right that you're feeling nervous. You start to give yourself good counsel, as though it's coming from another person. That internal inner dialogue, I think, is really important. To tell yourself, hey, look, you're going to feel nervous. That's okay. That's not a problem. Even when you're a master of this, you're still going to feel nervous. You don't have to be perfect. That's okay. Give yourself those reassuring messages, because I think that is very, very helpful. And of course, Michelle is saying this, of course, HBM teaches us to use positive self-talk. And that's really an important part of beating the nerves. So step 2, prepare. This is something that I think, it sounds obvious, but it's not something that all of us do. And what I would emphasize here, when we talk about preparing, what do we actually prepare? Is it just to meet the person? Is it just the presentation? What is it that you prepare? If you've noticed, if you've ever paid close attention to some of the stories that others share, and I think Dave Johnson is a good example of this. He's got certain lines and phrases that he shares that just sound so funny, and they just make things so simple. But if you think about it, he's rehearsed them. Many of us have heard them a number of times over, not because he's got nothing else to say, but he's teaching us something very important. He's been able to take an important concept, simplify it, make it amusing, turn it into a one-liner, and then before you know it, it just sounds fantastic. But that has taken preparation. And as I've said a number of times over, the great skill in writing is in the rewriting. Or that quote that I shared from Oscar Wilde, sorry for the long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. In order to write the short letter, in order to get your presentation so that it's concise, so that we cut away the fat, keep it lean, and keep it focused on the most important things. In order to get that, it takes preparation. So if I were you, I would encourage you to sit down with your presentation and go through it and prepare, look at what is essential, look at what isn't, and really put some time in to every aspect, not just in the words that you say. Also think about your grooming. How am I going to dress for this occasion? How am I going to represent myself? When I studied graphic design at university, one thing that they emphasized was that everything is encoded. The hairstyle that we have, whether I'm clean shaven or not, well, what clothes I wear, how I hold myself, the language that I use is all deliberate. Even if it's subconscious, it's subconsciously deliberate because we're wanting to represent ourselves in a certain manner to people. So I think that's really important, that we represent ourselves professionally and that we rehearse that process as well. I love what Eleanor Roosevelt says in this message here. If you prepare yourself at every point as well as you can, with whatever means you may have, however meager they may seem, and I love that because she's really reaching out to each of us here, you'll be able to grasp opportunity for broader experience when it appears. Without preparation, you just cannot do it. I love that. Preparation truly does precede power, doesn't it? And if we want power in our delivery, if we want power in our business, if we want power in anything, it requires us to prepare. So the third tip, and I love this one. I love Bruce Lee. I loved him as a kid, but he was certainly not just a great martial artist, but a wonderful and very insightful philosopher. So tip number 3, outside of prepare, is to practice. And I love what he says here. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Wow, my goodness. What kind of machine would we be if we practiced our business opportunity presentation 10,000 times? Can you imagine the confidence you would develop? Can you imagine how well you'd know it? Can you imagine all the different ways you would have rehearsed it? All the different scenarios, all the different situations, all the different opportunities that you'd have of coming at every different possible angle. To be able to teach it 10,000 times or to practice it 10,000 times would certainly make you a master, wouldn't it? And then in the very moment of any given situation that you're in, you would be able to deliver it with excellence. How does that come about? Practice. Repetition is the mother of all learning. It's also the mother of all mastery. If we want to be great at doing these things, we need to make sure that we practice. Let me just share with you a brief story on this regard. I'm going to stop the sharing for just a second. But when I was in my teenage years, the greatest love of my life was music. And I'm not sure if many of you know this, but I used to be a jazz musician. And I played in jazz bands. I started out in a Dixieland band, which is the traditional jazz. Ended up playing most of my time in swing bands, and just absolutely loved it. And music was my life. And if I wasn't in practices, if I wasn't playing at music festivals or for different performances or events, music was just in my heart and soul all the time. But this is what I found was particularly interesting. I remember kind of realizing this one day, and it was a bit of an aha moment. I would have early morning band practice when I was at school, before school would start. And there'd be a certain lick or a certain line that I would find complicated that I would practice in my head over and over. And I'd be sat there in class when I probably should be thinking about maths, which I bored the heck out of me. But I'd be sat there instead of thinking about my maths or science, and I'd be practicing in my head that line that I'd rehearsed that morning. I'd be going over it and over it and over it. And then when I'd go to the music department in my lunch break, because it was my life, that's where I spent all my time, I could play it better. But I'd never had my instrument with me in that space in between. I'd walk home from school and I'd practice improvising. Jazz musicians improvise their solos an awful lot. And I'd practice my improvising. I'd have music in my head. I'd visualize, and I'd listen to music and I'd imagine myself playing it versus just listening to the musicians. I would imagine it was me, and I'd imagine the stage, the audience, and I'd rehearse and I'd practice in my head. And then when I get my instrument out, I'd be better. Now, there's a certain point here that is really important. We can practice when we're driving to do our grocery shopping. We can practice while we're in the shower. We can practice while we're getting dressed. While you're on your lunch break eating your lunch, you can practice and you can get better. That time that we use in our head, when it is combined and connected with our heart, is a powerful period of time for improvement. So I would emphasize that when we talk about practice, that we recognize the value of that alone time, where it might just be me and my head. But that is really, really important time to be able to use well. So let's move on to point number 4, which is breathe. Now this one is an interesting one. I'm not sure if any of you have taken time to consider breathing techniques. I was certainly taught breathing techniques as a brass player, but I've also learned that when I get stressed or anxious, my breathing gets shallow. It gets shorter and more shallow, and as a result of that, my stress and my anxiety increases. And it happens subconsciously. But when I consciously make a note to take deep breaths, and I learned as a brass player that you breathe out starting from your stomach and then breathe up. So you breathe out and then up, and you get a much bigger breath of air. But take deep breaths and then breathe out. And what you'll find that does is it calms you down. It's remarkable. But if we're feeling nervous, or if we're feeling anxious or stressed or worried, and keep in mind that you might feel that even in your practice moments, even if it is just you in your head and you're rehearsing before you're about to speak to someone, you might feel that pre-presentation butterflies. In those moments, take that time to, okay, I'm feeling this, stop, take a deep breath, and feel the difference. It is remarkable, but changing our breathing pattern seriously does help to eliminate the nerves. So take some time there just to breathe. So tip number 5, moving on to this, is rehearse. And this, I think it was the Dalai Lama that said this: an ounce of practice is worth more than a ton of preaching. I love that. But I like this point here that I've put in for emphasis, because rehearsal, you might say, well, what's the difference between rehearsing and practicing? I think with this rehearsal point is that we don't just practice the presentation, but in a rehearsal, if you're an artist, be it an actor or a musician, in rehearsal, you're not just rehearsing or practicing the notes, you're not just reading the music, but you're getting into the very emotion of everything. You get right down into the feelings. You get into the energy of it all, and you visualize the performance, because rehearsal in itself is a performance. Practice might be, going over some lines, might be going over some of the technicalities of something, might be aiming for skill proficiency. But when you're rehearsing something, it's a visualizing experience. And what I would encourage you to do as you rehearse is to rehearse a successful outcome. When we get nervous, when we are worried, when we put off through fear doing something like showing the presentation, what tends to happen is we're doing that because in our mind, perhaps subconsciously, we are rehearsing failure. I'm nervous, I'm worried about what might happen, and then we anticipate all the things that could go wrong, and as a result of that, we put it off, we procrastinate, or we make excuses to not do it. But if you rehearse succeeding, if you visualize the end result being wonderfully positive, being overwhelmingly fantastic, and you rehearse that over and over in your mind, even if it doesn't work out that way for that particular presentation, that's okay. We keep on rehearsing that way because we know that that same kick practiced 10,000 times is certainly going to make us a master. And so we need to rehearse over and over in our mind and in our heart a wonderful victory, a wonderful celebration. Part of your rehearsal, I would suggest, is not just the presentation of the moment, but I would have you rehearse a few stages ahead and imagine yourself on stage as you're getting pinned as a new diamond, or as you're getting pinned as a new royal diamond, or perhaps as you're stepping off the plane, being greeted by a chauffeur who's going to take you to your Team Kaizen destination in Japan. Yeah, as they're taking you to your 5-star luxury hotel that's paid for by Nikan. Visualize and rehearse that moment. Imagine yourself getting off the plane and being greeted by that chauffeur. Imagine yourself paying off your mortgage. Imagine yourself having that wonderful vacation with your family. Imagine yourself with your team, all succeeding together on stage, being celebrated for your collective successes. Rehearse that. Take some time to rehearse that moment, because that, to me, is perhaps one of the most important things we can rehearse. Again, going back to my music days, I would spend a lot of my time practicing, but the amount of time I spent in my mind rehearsing being on stage, rehearsing playing in front of an audience, rehearsing that solo piece in my head, even when I didn't have one, but just visualizing the moment when I could, encouraged me to perform better and to do better. What rehearsal does is it adds the heart element to the mind. Practice is often in the head. Rehearsal, I think, is a lot in the heart. And this is kind of combining the two together. So let's move on to the next step here. Focus on your audience. Again, I think this is really important. I found this as a presenter, particularly when I was a trainer. It says here, when you focus only on yourself and neglect others, you lose. But you'll gain if you value others as much as you cherish yourself. A number of years ago, I was a trainer. I was a training manager. And my job was to train the trainers. And a lot of the time, part of my responsibility as a training manager was to go to different classrooms and sit and observe the trainer and observe the classroom environment, and then, of course, provide feedback so that they could have repractice and what have you. So a lot of it was observation and feedback, as well as all the training, the formal training side of things. But what I noticed sometimes was that some presenters, some trainers, loved being in front of the room. And as a result of that, they made the presentation about themselves versus about their audience, because they loved being the showman. Yeah, I think what is really important in being a great presenter of a plan is that we learn to forget ourselves. We almost become irrelevant. Don't focus on being the showman, even though, of course, all this practice is in focusing on your skills. There's somewhat of a paradox here, that you want to rehearse your skills, you want to practice your skills, you want to rehearse the outcomes, the great results, but in the presentation, you forget yourself. It's no longer about you. It's now all about the other person. So forget yourself, don't make it about you, and also try to be natural with that. I found sometimes when people are presenting, their tone of voice seems to change. They get this certain teacher's voice. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. Sometimes I've seen that, where people might get this teacher's voice and maybe this teacher's body language, where they're trying to be someone that they're not. Maybe they've seen someone else that they're trying to copy. What I would say is just be yourself, relax, and then forget yourself and just focus on the audience. And what you'll find as well with this, when you focus on them and you forget yourself, is your fears really start to diminish, because what you find is your fear and your nerves are actually all about you versus about the person you're talking to. If you focus on the other person, that can actually diminish your fears and your worries quite a bit. So that can be helpful with the nerves as well. So tip number 7, and we've heard this over and over again. I'm not going to drill too much on this, but keep it simple. I like this. See it big, but keep it simple. And I love what Leonardo da Vinci said here: simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I love that. And when I worked in advertising, I began my career as a graphic designer, and I worked in some ad agencies in New Zealand when I first got started. But I found that all the top agencies, the real cream of the crop, creme de la creme, the most expensive, the most well-known ad agencies in the country, their brand style was all simplicity and sophistication. And I loved that. They weren't over the top in everything that they showed. There was elegance and sophistication in their simplicity, and that's what made them great. They didn't need to show off. They didn't need to have fancy tricks. They were just them. And I think that's a sign of great confidence, that we don't need party tricks to make ourselves look good. We can just be ourselves, but keep it simple. And I think that really helps a great deal. I like this as well. Gary Berryman said, just keep it simple. When you overthink what you're wearing, that's when wardrobe malfunctions tend to happen. And of course, we're not on the catwalk here. But what I would say is that's also where things tend to go wrong when we're giving presentations. If we try to overthink something, we can make it complicated and mess it up. Let's just keep it simple, and that will often simplify the outcome as well. Tip number 8, I think I've touched on this a little bit already as I've talked about rehearsal. If you want to reach your goal, this is all about visualizing success. If you want to reach your goal, you must see the reaching in your own mind before you actually arrive at your goal. That to me is really, really important. I have found that there isn't anything we achieve in life physically without first achieving it in our minds. It seems that everything is created spiritually first before it is created physically. And so if we want to create a certain outcome, we need to visualize it and believe it and see it and feel it with conviction in here and in here in our hearts. I was taught, again as a trainer, that convincing teaching comes from conviction. Where does that conviction come? Interestingly, if you go, I'm not sure if I've got that conviction yet, where does it come from? It comes from the practice. Eunice, that's right. It comes from in here. Yeah. It comes from the practice. It comes from the rehearsal. It comes from the self-belief. And that belief grows, of course, the more we rehearse, the more we practice, the more we visualize, the more we create. So here's a question for you. If our convictions and our rehearsal, if our confidence and our seeing it and our achievement in our mind is what leads to the achievement in reality, as you look at your current behavior, what do you think your mind is perhaps presently telling you? Is it telling you you can do it? Are you doing it? Are you on track? Or is your mind currently telling you, no, you can't? Our behavior is the fruit of what we think, feel, and believe. So often, if we change what we think, feel, and believe, then the behavior changes as a consequence. But you can also work backwards. Look at our behavior. What does that tell me about what I think? What does that tell me about what I really believe? And let's see if there is a conflict there and something that we might need to change. Okay, so number 9, connect with your audience. And again, I've talked about this very briefly in saying, don't make it about yourself. But what I want to emphasize here is make it overwhelmingly about the person in front of you, be it one person or everyone. And I'll give you an example of this. As I'm giving this presentation now, deliberately, I have faces in front of me. I can see Randy Rolfe, Marianne Kelcher, Mary Robson, and Eunice Daniels staring right back at me. And for me, as I'm giving this presentation, I'm talking directly to you. And every now and then, at the beginning of each presentation, as I'm saying hello, you will have noticed this pattern on my calls. Before I hit the record button, I go through to see who's on the call. I say hello. I look for familiar faces. I look for new faces that I haven't seen before. I reach out and I say hi, and I see you so that I can talk to you versus talk to a camera. I want to talk to you. I want to reach out and connect with you. And that, I think, is really important. that it's not just about forgetting ourselves, but it's about loving the person that you're talking to. If you can connect with them on an emotional level, that will change everything. And I love this quote. I'm sure you've heard it many times over. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And what I have found is, in fact, and if they know how much you care, and that's a lot, that makes up for all the deficit in what I know or what I don't know. It makes up tremendously. Brand new people have a wonderful advantage in being able to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I love it. I love what I'm doing, and I know it's going to be great for you, and it's great for me, and all that energy and excitement transfers to the other person, and they get involved and they oversee the lack of knowledge. Love can make up a huge difference. Make it all about the person in front of you. Personalize it. Look them in the eye. Use eye-to-eye contact. Use appropriate body language to communicate your feelings and show them that you love them. Make it all about them. And I think it was Dave Johnson. Dave's on the call. He might be able to refresh my memory on this quote. I was chatting with Charlie LeMay a little while ago, and he quoted you, Dave. It's not about being interesting. It's about being interested. Yeah? And that can make a huge difference. Be interested in the person versus striving to be interesting. Okay, last point, and then we've gone just a moment over our time here. Act confident. Now, I've deliberately put this quote up here because sometimes people misunderstand what it means to act confident. We've heard this saying a long time, fake it till you make it, and people try to act ballsy and brash and sometimes overact the confidence. But I love this. The X factor of great leadership is not personality, it's humility. Now, why am I putting up humility when I'm talking about confidence? Because, in my eyes, humility is knowing who we really are. That's my interpretation of the word or the term humility. It's not having a distorted perspective of myself. Humility is knowing who I really am. And that means all the potential, that divine potential that lies within us. But at the same time, there's that wonderful paradox that we are less than the dust of the earth, yet also we are of infinite value. When I truly know who I am, that breeds humility, not arrogance. And when we talk about being confident, we are not talking about being arrogant. In fact, we're really talking about being humble. And when we can strive to teach with humility, that can have a significant impact on how people receive our message. So when I say there to act confident, what I'm in fact saying is one of the great virtues of leadership is humility. And true confidence is not arrogance, but humility. So we've gone through a lot of tips today. I hope you found them helpful. We've recorded this presentation. It is going to be available on the Magnetic Leaders website and on the Royal Alliance website. You may want to go over this a few times. I'll also share the PowerPoint slides so you can have them for your own reference too. But what I would say is this: if we learn to love and we love those that we serve, we do find that everything else starts to fall into place. Fear starts to disappear. What is it that it says? Perfect love casteth out all fear. Is that what it says? It does, isn't it? That's the saying, isn't it? Perfect love casteth out all fear. As we learn to love others, as we learn to focus on them, we'll learn to recognize who we really are as well. That true perfect love also goes inward. We start to love ourselves the right way, and as a consequence, we can love others the right way. And then we get focused on them, we grow in confidence, we practice more, we invest ourselves more, and the results just start to grow. But what is your starting point today? That's my question to you tonight, or this morning for many of you. What is your starting point when we look at those 10 steps or those 10 tips? Where do you feel inclined to start? Have a good think, take some time out, rehearse, practice, make it count. And I promise you, as you do this, your business will blossom and your results will come in. And that rehearsal, seeing yourself, like I said, stepping off the plane, being picked up by that chauffeur, taking you to that 5-star luxury resort in Japan. can be something that comes to pass for you. So I love you lots, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.